I'm a 90s kid, and my parents were teenagers in the late 80s and early 90s. So naturally, growing up, we had a lot of VHS tapes in the house. We were a movie family. That was our language. That's how we spent our quality time together. We had tons of tapes. And it feels to me like every time I, to this day, pop a VHS tape in, it's like a time machine that takes me back to when I was a kid and even a teenager. Because even though when I was a teenager, everybody else had already, shifted away from VHS to DVDs. And we had DVDs in our house for sure. But I kept hold of our VCR. They used to be in the living room back in the day. And I would still watch VHS tapes. Specifically, there was a VHS tape of Back to the Future that I always had in that. I pretty much watched that movie every day, I think, for all of probably sophomore year. And it got to the point where the VCR had to be repaired or really just cleaned. I used to have to take like rubbing alcohol and Q-tips and just clean it like once a week. And I loved it. And when I got my own place, grew up, moved out, I started to collect VHS tapes again. And so I would go to Goodwill or City Thrift or any sort of like thrift stores around. Even the library bookstore would have them. And I just collected them for a few years there before COVID. And I've amassed over 160. And I just figured it'd be fun to kind of go down that nostalgia lane for a bit with you guys and talk about some of the tapes in the collection. Like I said, I have over 160 of them. So I am not going to obviously go through all 160 right now. But I have a selection. I decided not to go just here's horror for this video and then in another video do whatever. So I figured I would just do kind of a hodgepodge of tapes from different genres, and figured I would start with what's in the backdrop over here. So let me grab that. But we'll start with the Kevin Smith section here.
I love the smell of commerce in the morning.
So Mallrats. That's my favorite movie of all time. I agree with KPHYFM morning show Detroit. You'll laugh your ass off. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I know Kevin Smith, at least for a long time, would joke about this movie because it was a bomb. He came out with Clerks, he was an indie darling, and then he comes out with this movie and it just completely does not do what he expected it to do. But he even tells you that like it found its audience. And that audience apparently was me as a child. Now this is a newer to me copy at least. What's funny is this has no previews on it. Like when you pop it in, like the movie just starts right up.
That kid is back on the escalator again. Leave it alone. What?
But it's not the copy I had growing up. This is a different one because I did not have the slipcover anymore from the one when I was a kid. But the original tape is right here. This is the original tape that I watched all the time growing up. This is the one that got me into movies. That's the whole reason I went to film school. It's the whole reason my screenwriting professor laughed at me when I said my favorite movie was Mallrats.
I was gonna propose to her. Where? The Universal tour.
You're kidding. What part?
When Jaws pops out of the water.
That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard.
And I think another reason I really love VHS tapes is it just feels tangible. There's a tangibility to it, this analog format. You put it in and you see it. It's not the most clear image. I mean, some movies are just straight up kind of awful to watch on VHS because of the crop that they would do back in the day, formatting it to fit your TV. But there's just something tangible about it. It feels real. Like, I don't know, so many movies today just feel so digital and just squeaky clean. And so to pop something in like this, it just feels so tangible and real. Dogma is straight up, it's super interesting because I did not really grow up religious. I didn't really start going to church until after I had my kid.
Christ didn't come to earth to give us the willies. He came to help us out.
And I'm not really going to talk about religion. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about movies. But it's really interesting knowing Kevin Smith's background growing up, Catholic and everything, and then making this movie. It is such a great movie. and it's so such an interesting combination because it goes there dramatically, you know, but it also is hilarious. I mean, it's it's got Jay and Silent Bob showing up thinking they're going to Shermer, Illinois. There is no Shermer in Illinois.
We could live like fat rats if we were the Blunt Connection in Shermer, Illinois.
I mean, literally, look at this cast though, man. Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Selma Hayek. It's my dream girl when I was a kid. Jason Lee is one of my favorite actors of all time, as you can tell from Mallrats. This is for Brody. Yeah, Chris Rock in here, George Carlin, Alan Rickman. I mean, this is like all-star caliber cast right here. In this movie that like has this really important message that we all can play a purpose. We all have a purpose in life, and even, you know, even if you feel down, even if you feel like you've lost your way, like you have a purpose. You have a place. It's really, really one of my favorites. Now this one's funny, because you would think I have Clerks, but I don't actually have Clerks. Now this one, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, is one that's funny. I remember my aunt told me this is the only movie she's ever walked out of in the theater. But I love this movie. It's so stupid. It's ridiculous, but gotta love it. All right, so next up we're gonna talk about Halloween. Let's get into it. I mean, this is what we're looking at here. So Halloween, got the first one. Got Halloween 2. Halloween 2. Got Halloween 3. This one's starting to come out of the case a little bit there. Halloween 3. The controversial, as it were. Halloween 3. Still love this movie. I remember growing up, my dad was like, that one doesn't even have Michael in it. It's still great. It's still great. And then Halloween 4. Halloween 4. And Halloween 5. Another one that some people think is pretty silly, but I think it's pretty cool. I will eventually probably do a ranking on these movies, but I will say, obviously Halloween is arguably the best, one of the best horror movies of all time. So argue with your mama on that one, but it is, I mean, it's incredible. Come on. John Carpenter's Halloween is the pinnacle of slasher movies. And this is one of the ones I was saying that it's hard because, you know, when you put this one on VHS, you really miss out on a lot of that stuff. It was really hard to see like Michael driving the car or some of the shadow stuff. It's actually kind of hard to make out on VHS. So while it's cool to have on VHS, definitely it really isn't one that I throw on regularly on VHS. But this one, Halloween 4, this opening is like the most fall vibes you will ever experience in your life. Is just putting this on. It could be 100 degrees outside in the middle of July, but you put this on, and I like to put it on VHS, and you just get that you get that kind of grain and that VHS vibe going on with all that fall aesthetic. Oh, it's perfection. It's perfection. What's funny is I don't have Halloween 6 on VHS, which is controversially probably my favorite sequel, or it's up there. It changes. It's fun. It's always fun when they have the behind the scenes featurettes on here.
Stay tuned after the feature for a special message.
Super cool. So I have Scream right here, and it is sensational, terrific entertainment, clever, hip, and scary. Absolutely love this movie. I know some people, there are a fair amount of people that aren't super big fans of the Scream movies. They think they're too meta.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
I love them. I think they're fantastic. I don't think there is a bad Scream movie. I think they're all great. But what's funny, and these are fun to have on VHS because they're so 90s, you know what I mean? But what's fun is part 2 came out so soon after part 1. There's actually a preview for part 2 on the part 1 VHS.
Coming soon to theaters.
Let's get down to business. The way I see it, someone's out to make a sequel. You know, cash in on all the movie murder hoopla. So it's our job to observe the rules of the sequence.
Again, I'll probably do a ranking. If you guys want me to do rankings of like the big horror franchises, let me know, because I will happily do that if that is something y'all are interested in. All right, so let's move on to the stuff that's not in the backdrop. Okay, I kind of missed one that's in the backdrop. You can't really tell. I just actually found it because Halloween 5 had fallen behind there, and when I went to go find it from behind the shelves, I actually found Legend. Now, Legend is, I mean, it's so good. Tim Curry, ooh, so good in this. And it just has this really kind of majestic feel that, like, on VHS does feel so, it feels extra fantasy to me. All right, so next we're going to get into some drama. Now, I'm only going to show you a couple, because honestly, I was looking at my collection, and it's like 2/3 of it are just horror and comedy, and then the rest of it is like a lot of kids movies, and then some drama, and then a lot of sports movies. So we'll get into that maybe in another video. But we'll start out in our little drama section here with a movie called Riding in Cars with Boys. Now, this is a movie that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but it is arguably, I think, Drew Barrymore's best performance in a movie ever. And it is honestly the performance of a career for Steve Zahn. Like, it's... This is definitely one that'll make you cry. But it's just such a great story about parenthood, and it's like so well acted. Brittany Murphy in this movie is just incredible. Literally every character in this is such a standout. Like, everyone does such a good job, and you know, it's definitely one of those movies that was a staple in my house growing up. And if you guys love this movie, let me know in the comments, because literally nobody talks about this movie, and it is one of my favorites of all time. This is an all-timer right here. All-timer performances through and through. You got some Everly Brothers music in there to really, really take it home. You've got, I mean, there's a line in here that Steve Zahn says, like, when he has to leave, right? When Drew Barrymore tells him to leave, and he tells his son, "You're going to hear a lot of bad things about me,
But only 2 of the 3 things are going to be right. So, when you hear something that's really, really bad, you try to think that that's the one time that they're wrong, okay?"
One of the most heartbreaking moments in a movie, and this is a staple. This is a staple for sure. All right, and last but not least in our little drama section here, even though, okay, this is Forrest Gump, obviously everyone loves Forrest Gump. I'm glad I have this one on VHS. This is such a great movie. I would argue this, and I tell people this when they ask me what my favorite movie is. I go, well, my favorite movie is Mallrats, but in my opinion, the best movie ever made, technically, for me, is Forrest Gump. It is such a great story. I mean, like, maybe the performance of a lifetime from Tom Hanks. And, I mean, come on. Lieutenant Dan in this as well. Like, this is one that, like, it pushed the boundaries of technology at the time. It's every single character in this is acted to perfection. It's super quotable. There's action, there's drama, there's comedy. And it's weird that when you look this up, it's categorized as a comedy romance. And it has those, but it has, like, kind of everything. To me, this is a perfect movie. All right, next up, we're going to get into some 80s stuff. I have a fair amount of 80s stuff, so I'm going to kind of take it little by little here. But I was just going to show you some of my favorite stuff that I have from the 80s on VHS. Now, got to talk about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, guys. Come on, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's a freaking classic. That's where I get my whole sign-off from at the end of every video. Be excellent to each other. This is one that I grew up watching this and Bogus Journey. I'm kind of more partial to Bogus Journey, to be honest with you. But I do love both of them. And I think that Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, come on. You got George Carlin as Rufus. I mean, this is like, it's a banger. It's a banger of a movie. It's hilarious. It's fun. We're having a good time.
Bill, what? Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
It's one of those good time movies, and these are good time characters. And I mean, who doesn't love Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? I mean, come on. If you don't like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, I don't even know what to tell you, man. I don't even know what to tell you. You just can't be fun at parties if you don't like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Or maybe you just don't like silly movies. But I love silly movies. Speaking of silly, just kidding. This is Better Off Dead, John Cusack. No one really talks about this movie, but this is one of my favorite 80s movies by far. It has this like heightened sense of reality to it. It's very, like I said, heightened. It feels not really like reality, but it's really, I mean, it's about as much fun as you can have in a movie that's about a guy who's trying to kill himself every 2 seconds. But it's one that if you haven't seen this movie, I highly, highly recommend you watch this movie. It is easily, I don't know about easily, but it is arguably my favorite John Cusack moment in a movie. But definitely check this one out if you haven't. Definitely check this one out if you haven't. And if you have, share your love in the comments. All right, you got to talk about the pinnacle of teen movies. The pinnacle. You got to talk about The Breakfast Club. I mean, this is one that, I think it says 1985, and I think, okay, so this VHS is actually from 1990, so it's still older than me. But, yeah, I mean, literally written and directed by John Hughes. Like, my parents were teenagers in the 80s. Like, this is the pinnacle of the teen movie. It, again, perfectly cast. Everybody does such a great job. And I somehow managed to marry a woman who is an exact combination of Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy in this movie, so living the dream over here. But, I mean, it's another one that I would probably categorize as a perfect movie. It has, like, a great message about how we're all, more alike than we think. We have more in common. And how hard life can be. And especially when you're at that young age where you're kind of going through it, you're changing a lot. The future is heading right at you, and you got to figure a lot out about your life. And you're in high school, and it's all tribal, right? You're all in your own little groups. And I mean, what can I say about The Breakfast Club that hasn't already been said? I mean, it's the one, it's the teen movie. Now, speaking of that Back to the Future I was talking about earlier, this isn't the one, because this is an actually unopened copy from 1995, an unopened copy of Back to the Future. Yeah, this one, this is another one I would say is a perfect movie. I mean, it just is. It's a movie for all ages, a wonderful fantasy, a delectable comedy, according to the quotes on the back here. It's the one that I watched every day all of sophomore year in high school. It's the movie. I mean, it's like perfectly, like, again, perfectly cast. Even though, like, it started out with, what was it, Eric Stoltz instead of Michael J. Fox, and it wasn't Jeff Goldblum or somebody even in talks or even auditioned for Doc Brown. But I mean, come on, Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Crispin Glover, Leah Thompson, directed by Robert Zemeckis, who I think is, like, before he got into all the Beowulf stuff, was, and I think is, one of the most underrated directors of all time. I love Zemeckis. And this movie, again, it's a perfect movie. It's got a perfect story. It's so iconic. The design of everything is iconic. The character outfits, to the DeLorean, to the clock tower, the art design and costuming on this movie, the soundtrack and score to this movie. It's just, again, like, there's absolutely zero faults with this movie. It is, man, this is definitely a top 5 movie of all time, I think, for me. For sure. So now we're going to pivot to some kind of family kids movies from my childhood that I love and that I'm happy to have on VHS here. One of them is a movie called Good Boy. Now, this is a movie that, again, it's another one I don't really hear people talk about too much, but I mean, it's basically a movie about how dogs are aliens from another planet, and a representative from that planet, voiced by Matthew Broderick, comes down, gets adopted by this boy who just wants a dog so bad. He gets named Hubble, and he finds out that dogs don't run the planet. And so they have to try to work with this group of other dogs here that our main character walks in order to try to convince the Greater Dane, when she comes to visit, that the dogs are running the planet. It is super, super funny. It's just a good time. This is a good time. Check it out if you haven't. And if you have, again, let me know what you think about that one down in the comments. All right. Now this tape is a little worse for wear, or at least the slipcover is. Small Soldiers. Yeah, this is definitely one that I loved growing up. It's the most probably 90s boy movie you could imagine. And it's directed by Joe Dante, which I just learned. The director of Gremlins and The Howling and The Burbs, among others. And but that makes sense. Little kind of creatures running around, so that tracks. Yeah, this is like just one where it's like you ask any millennial guy about this movie and they're gonna say it rules. Like this is like banger of a movie. Even more of a banger now that I know that Joe Dante directed it. That's awesome. So check that one out if you haven't, for sure. Now next up, we have The Page Master. Page Master. Now this one might be able to credit this one for me getting into horror movies when I was younger. But yeah, I mean, this is one where a kind of fearful, how do they describe it? Yeah, timid Richard Tyler, played Macaulay Culkin, finds refuge in a library and ends up becoming animated and going on an adventure through the library with books that are based on various different genres of literature, and they have to find their way to the exit sign. And it's just so good. I mean, Garth Bishop from Parent to Parent magazine said it's a hit. It's the Wizard of Oz for the 90s. I don't know if I'd say that, but I would say it is one of my favorite movies from the 90s, and it has a feel to it. It's so nostalgic for me. You got Christopher Lloyd again.
I am the Page Master, keeper of the books, and guardian of the written word.
It just is a great combination. I mean, it literally you go through the genres. You got action, you got horror, you got fantasy, and it specifically that Jekyll and Hyde scene in the horror section was pivotal for me getting into horror when I was younger, for sure. Love this movie. All right, what we got next? We got Matilda. So this is one that I would consider this an all-timer for me. There's something about the vibe of this movie. I think Danny DeVito did such a good job with this movie. He directed it in it. He played the dad in it, and he does the voiceover. And that voiceover has such that voiceover almost feels like home to me. That might sound kind of weird to say, but like there's a vibe to this movie that just feels so cozy to me.
And Matilda found, to her great surprise, that life could be fun. And she decided to have as much of it as possible.
And, it's that combination of his voiceover with the score, with the, just the acting in it is so good. And, I mean, just, it has a vibe to it that just makes me feel so nostalgic every time I put it on. And I liked the new one, the new musical on Netflix. I thought it was good. But this one will always hold a special place in my heart for sure. And it's fun to have this. On VHS from '96. Got the big clamshell case for it. It's yeah. Man. It's hard to say, put into words when movies are just ingrained in your brain like that, you know what I mean? And this is one of those movies that is for sure ingrained deep in my brain. And from the soundtrack to the acting of Miss Honey and Trunchbull and obviously Danny DeVito and Ray Perlman, but it just means a lot to me. It's like one of those movies that just means a lot to me. And I'll always love this movie. And it's one that I'm going to share with my kids and everything. And it's one of those movies, It's just one of those. Okay, so I was looking at my movies and I realized that I'm a really big Adam Sandler fan. And I feel like that's pretty obvious, being a millennial guy, that I would be an Adam Sandler fan. But I didn't realize I had all of these on VHS. So we can kind of run through them. Not in any particular order. All right. So now 50 First Dates. Everybody loves 50 First Dates. It is pretty iconic. I would say it's probably one of his more iconic movies, even though kind of it was after that 90s run, because it's like, what, 2004 or 2003? Yeah, 2004, I believe. Which is kind of wild that this is on VHS. This is probably towards the end of the VHS era. But you know this movie. You love this movie. It's heartwarming. It's hilarious. Oh, that's fun. Look at that. Previously viewed movie from Hollywood Video. If you can see that. From Hollywood Video. Ha! That's fun. Yeah, Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. Gotta love Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. We'll get back to that here in a minute. But yeah, I mean, Sean Astin in this movie is also, it might be his best role. You know, everybody loves Lord of the Rings, but dude, him as her brother in this movie is one of the best comedic performances of all time, I think. Oh man, so good. You got the Beach Boys. I mean, everybody loves this movie. Everybody should love this movie, for sure. Now, next up, let's talk about The Waterboy. Got The Waterboy. That's a good one. It's a banger. It's hilarious. You know it. You love it. It's The Waterboy. Come on. I mean, you could argue it's the beginning of him. I mean, of course, SNL was really the beginning of him doing the silly voices, but this was the beginning of him doing the silly voices in a movie, and in the leading role.
Now that's what I call high quality H2O.
I think you got a direct line from this to Hubie Halloween, which I love Hubie Halloween, but the voice can be a bit much sometimes. You know, like in That's My Boy or whatever. It's like, you can comment down on the voice a little bit, but I mean, he does it to perfection in this one. It's a great one. I'm a fan. I like all this stuff. Except for I haven't seen The Ridiculous Six or Jack and Jill, or I haven't seen Spaceman yet. If you've seen Spaceman, let me know how that one is. That one actually looks really good. Got Billy Madison. This is another banger right here. Really, really good one. Really, really good one. Classic Adam Sandler right here. This is definitely one that we watched a lot in my house growing up, for sure. Yeah, it looks like this tape is from 1995. How fun. Yeah, no, this is a hilarious one. It's classic Adam Sandler. He, loved the scene with Steve Buscemi when he, crosses Billy Madison off the list. So good. Now, Happy Gilmore. That's one that, this was probably the staple in my house growing up, I would say. This one right here was, I think it was the first one I saw. And it is also what got me into Lynyrd Skynyrd, because Tuesday's Gone is in the soundtrack to this. You have to clarify that it's the funniest golf comedy since Caddyshack. How many golf comedies can there be? But no, this is one of the funniest movies ever made. It's so good. And it's got that classic Adam Sandler, the lovable kind of doofus a little bit, you know? And it's just, you know, it's one of his best movies to this day. Definitely.
That's your home! Are you too good for your home? Answer me!
Now, all right, let's get over to this one. We got Big Daddy. Now, this is one that was another staple in my house growing up, for sure. And it's definitely one that tugs at the heartstrings, you know?
But I want my own ass! I want my own ass!
Yeah, you got Cole Sprouse, Dylan Sprouse in this, doing the classic Mary Kate and Ashley thing, where in Full House, where they just switch in and out. Now this is such a good one. This one is definitely one that tugs at your heartstrings. You got Jon Stewart in there when he was still acting, before he became the Daily Show Jon Stewart. You got, you know, the typical, you know, Adam Sandler crew in this one, and it's one of those really heartwarming movies that I'll put on just to tug at the heartstrings while also getting a good laugh, getting a good laugh. All right, so now let's move on to Mr. Deeds. Now, Mr. Deeds, I'm not going to talk too much about because if I'm being completely honest, didn't watch this one a lot. It's good. It's another heartwarming one. You know, this small town guy gets all this money and gets to go. Basically, it almost feels a little bit like Tom Hanks' Big, right? Where he's just like, oh, I get to just go and live this different life now. But it's good. Gotta love John Turturro and Winona Ryder in anything. So it's good, but it definitely was not a staple in my house growing up. But now we gotta end it with my favorite Adam Sandler movie. I don't know if this is gonna be controversial or not, but it's The Wedding Singer. The Wedding Singer is one of my favorite movies of all time. Now it's funny because this movie, you know, came out in the 90s, but takes place in 1985, which 1985 is like one of the most iconic years in movies, right? Breakfast Club, Fright Night, huge year. Back to the Future, huge year for movies, and music. And but this is like probably my favorite romantic comedy that's ever existed. Again, you got Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. I think a lot of people would probably say they like 50 First Dates more. But to me, this just like strikes a chord with me. I just feel it. The chemistry between them is so great.
That was the most beautiful song.
I got a confession to make. That song was about you.
The music is so good. It plays up the 80s thing. There's multiple songs in the movie that I think are just great standout songs. And I know that like Adam Sandler had kind of proven on SNL and in other ways that he was a great musician, but I think this kind of cemented it for me that like, man, this, if he wanted to, like, he could just do music and have a successful career, especially with the song I Want to Grow Old With You. I mean, I absolutely just love this movie. I mean, it is, again, it has that nostalgic feel to it, but there's so many songs. There's so many songs in this movie that are so good throughout it, whether it's really funny songs but even the funny ones have like kind of an emotional depth to them. Honestly, I Want to Grow Old With You is one of my favorite songs of all time. Like it means a lot to me. So I think that's about it. I think that's all I'm going to cover for today. I know I didn't go too deep on a lot of that. I mean, we're just trying to get through a lot, trying to show you what all I have in the collection and give you a little bit of backstory on how I interacted with these movies growing up. Still have a lot more to get to. We didn't even really touch on anything sci-fi. I have a whole horror section all over here. We didn't even get into a lot of the 90s teen comedies that I love. So yeah, I absolutely am excited to keep going with this. If you guys like this type of content, please let me know. If there's anything you think I could do to improve it, let me know. And again, all the movies I talked about today, please let me know in the comments, like if you love those movies or any memories that those movies bring up for you. Yeah, so I think that's it. And until next time, be excellent to each other.